right, today we've got an interesting topic. We're talking about how to handle customer conflict and not make things worse.
Because we can make it worse.
Now, this is Michelle's actually a great person to talk to us about this because I've seen her in action. So stick around. Okay, so you guys know what's coming. There are 3 simple steps that I'm excited to hear. I haven't heard them yet, but I know that Michelle's got 3 simple steps that she does, to handle conflict like this with customers. But to start off, I actually saw this in action, and maybe you won't even think of this as customer conflict. But there was an email that was sent, and okay, you're smiling. There was an email that was sent, and the way that I wanted to respond,
right?
The way that you responded was awesome. It was amazing. It got the job done. It showed professionalism. It showed respect. It made everybody happy. Like, seriously, I'm like, Michelle is a powerhouse. So I don't know if there's anything you want to share about that specific story or maybe another story, but how did you want to react, and how did you react in such an amazing way?
Well, I think that's the number one thing that you need to remember. And this is not the 3-step process yet, but in any customer conflict experience, you have to check your own emotions at the door, because it can be really easy to respond, and all conflict starts with blame. So all customers, whether they're having any problems or something's wrong, something's ripped, something's broken, something didn't work, somebody didn't fulfill something, starts with blame. And so it can be really easy to respond with either blame back or blaming other people or other circumstances, which escalates the circumstances instead of diminishing the problem and the solution. And so it's interesting whether you are dealing with haters online, or whether you have a customer who comes in and is mad about their purchase, or even through via email, you have to figure out how to check your emotions at the back and say, wait a second, how can I resolve this without allowing my own defense mechanisms to say, wait a minute, you're being mean to me and I didn't really do that, or you're misunderstanding, to make sure that you're responding in a way that gets results rather than continues to add more emotion and more emotion and more emotion for bigger problems.
Which, that makes it worse. Mm-hmm. So I've grown a lot in this regard, but I've still got a long way to grow. I know the biggest thing that I've recognized is that defensiveness, or trying to defend myself, because when a customer has reported a problem, I would instantly go into defense mode saying, well, this is what we did and this is what we had in our terms, and like, it never helped the situation. It never made it better. It always made it worse.
Right.
So in one case, it made it so much worse that, and I can't remember the exact domain, I don't think it's there anymore, but it was something like NateWoodburySucks.com or something like that. And it's like, I was like, man, I made the situation so much worse that, to try and find out, okay, what is it that the customer want, really to take emotion out of it, realize, don't try and defend. I'll filter my written responses and go back like, okay, is there anything in here where I'm trying to defend myself, and just remove all of that. That's been a big help. Okay,
I can see that. It's really tricky because, like you said, we want to defend ourselves. And in the end, that's not going to lead to the results that need to happen in the conversation. But that is our first instinct. And so I always give myself a break and say, wait a minute. Okay, before I respond, what do I say? And sometimes that's a challenge, because if there's a client right in front of you, or a person right in front of you, or a tweet that went out, or an email that got copied to multiple people, you're like, oh no, I need to respond really quickly. And even if you just take a second to say, give me a second, and I'll be right back with you, or whatever, taking that break can help you get to the actual results of the situation rather than the emotions that come first.
So ask me what superpower I would want if I could have one.
What superpower would you want if you could have one?
I would want to be able to freeze time.
Ooh.
That would be a super awesome human or superpower. Anyway, that would be cool, because then in the moment, something happens, it's really hard to pause because time doesn't stop.
No, it doesn't.
So
see, and my favorite superpower, the one I want, is to be able to read people's minds.
Okay.
So that I can see things before they happen and acknowledge them and get there. There might be some stuff I really don't want to know that I would hear, like
True.
What Women Want, right, with Mel Gibson. But I think generally speaking, And when it comes to those superpowers, freezing time will help you almost more than reading minds so that you can respond the way you want. So this is the rule of thumb that I use, that I teach my clients.
Rule of thumb.
It's a rule of thumb. It's actually the rule of 3, but I call it the ACT process. So this 3-step process, the first one is A, acknowledge frustration. Now, I'm careful because sometimes when you're resolving conflict, the instinct is to accept responsibility. In some cases, that might be the right way to acknowledge the frustration. But in other cases, no apology needs to be made. And in the conversation that you and I were talking about, I did not feel like an apology needed to be had, but I needed to acknowledge a frustration or acknowledge the circumstances. And so at first it can be like, I see that this is super frustrating, or I can see why that would be frustrating. Acknowledge their emotion. Now, it gives you a second to check your emotions a little bit, but if you can acknowledge the frustration and the feelings that they have, that's really what they want, is they want validation. So the A is for acknowledge frustration.
Before you move on, I like that it's acknowledge, not apologize.
Right, no.
Because apologize makes me want to say, but I didn't,
Right.
you know, but just acknowledging how they're feeling, yeah.
Now, I will tell you one circumstance. Sometimes apology is appropriate. I had a circumstance with a client a couple of weeks ago where we miscommunicated about what I was offering and what actually ended up happening. And I was very clear in my email and communication about what we were going to do, but they misread it. And so I went back and looked at the ways that I had said it, where I had assumed that they would understand some terminology that we use in our business that they didn't understand. And so I responded and was willing, as part of that process, to accept responsibility and apologize for my part of using jargon. So don't be afraid to apologize if it's due, but don't give an apology that doesn't need to be given.
Well, and I'll also, going back to the example that I thought of before, initiated by an email, I don't remember your exact wording, but you totally took responsibility yourself, even though it would have been easy and maybe even justifiable to put blame on several other places or people. You really just took responsibility yourself. I think that was a big part of what made me admire the response so much.
Well, and in that particular instant, and like I said, some of these we can use the 3-step formula and we can use the ACT process, but you really do have to look at every circumstance differently. And in that case, because I was quote unquote leader in charge of what was happening, in my mind, I knew that it was where it came back to me. And I think that that makes a fantastic leader, that it could be easy to say, oh, well, that team member didn't do this thing, or this person should have just assumed. But at the end of the day, I was the one who started that conversation. I was the one who initiated it, and I didn't see it through all the way to the end. And so I was willing to accept responsibility in that case and to acknowledge the frustration that it could have been mine, because I also wanted my team members to know that I had their backs. And that was really important to me, because in that particular instance, I didn't want to place blame on anyone else. I knew it was mine and I needed to take it. And even if it didn't have to be mine in that full sense, as the leader, it was the responsibility for me to take that. And I think that in that instant, it made it easier for all the other people who were copied, that they didn't feel like they had to respond defensively because I was the one who was willing to place that first.
That's awesome too, yeah.
So,
back to the 3
okay,
steps.
so the first one is acknowledge the frustration. The second one is consider your options. Now, considering your options can happen privately. In that particular case, I took a second to say, okay, what should I do and how should we respond and what are the ways we can handle this? When you're sitting with a customer right then and there, you can think through the options that are available, and sometimes you can offer options to the customer. So especially in retail circumstances, somebody comes in, they have a ripped shirt. Your options can be to refund their money or to offer them to get a different shirt or the same shirt that's there. And so there could be 2 options. Here are 2 options for you. So sometimes you allow those options to be public, and other times you just allow them to be internal to decide how you want to handle things. And sometimes when you have the time and somebody sends an email and they're not right in front of you, it gives you the opportunity to call the other people involved and to say, hey, here's what we can do. Here are the options that we have. What should we do before I go back to this person? So consider your options in all ways. And I think it's important to take time. And even when you have somebody right in front of you, be willing to say, could you give me just a minute? I want to consider all the options and find a solution that is mutually beneficial. And allow yourself the permission to ask for permission for time. So you have to give it, because sometimes in the heat of the moment we might want to respond, but realize later, oh wait, I should have done this, this, and this, and just a little bit of time will give you the opportunity. So take the time to consider the options privately and publicly.
especially if there's like an emotional response or adrenaline. You know, it's like it would be good to even if email comes in late at night. It's like, let's wait till morning.
Yeah. Well, yeah, sometimes I have to wait, and sometimes I'm like, I'm not going to sleep unless I respond to
That's
this.
true.
And in that case, I definitely felt like I needed to respond. But for sure, give yourself time. And, you know, even in conflicts in our personal relationships, give yourself permission to say, you've had some time to think about this. I'd like some time to think about this. Can we come back later? And so resolving conflict with customers or individuals, it's okay to say, hey, give me just a sec. I want to come back to you with awesome options.
Okay, so pretty cool. So we got act, acknowledge,
And consider.
and then
The
time.
T, take action.
Oh, so time is not part of.
No.
Okay. Ooh, we got a bonus.
See? So yes, considering your options can give you time as well, but the T in the act for me is to take action. And this is where I think some people don't really fully engage to resolve the conflict before it gets worse, right? And in some cases, whether it's that we need to do something or we need to make some actions or we need to do even give ourselves some more time, the taking the action piece is so important. And it's interesting because I had this experience a couple of days ago at a restaurant where there was a problem with my order. They had not given me something that I had ordered. And the person that I was working with, I was super kind. I wasn't like, this is terrible. I was just like, hey, I ordered this extra thing. The person behind the counter was like, oh, and just kind of sat there for a minute. And I had to be the one to initiate and say, what are our options? How can we do this? What do we need to do? And in that case, I couldn't wait longer. And so they were like, oh, well, I guess I could give you something else. And I was like, okay. And so but in that case, you also need to maybe initiate the taking action piece, but commit to take the action and to follow through if necessary. Some conflicts won't be resolved in the initial action, and that part of taking action is setting time to follow up. But if you start with those first 3 steps, even if it elongates the process in the end, you can keep it from getting worse by taking an initial action that will simmer the situation and also resolve the conflict.
And so I guess the opposite of taking action would just be to ignore it.
Totally ignore it. And we do that sometimes though, right? Sometimes we're like, okay, I'm not gonna respond to this email, or I'm gonna get a manager and let them deal with this client. And we just don't. We don't engage in following it through. But I think that to be key communicators and to be people who really make change, we need to take action. And we need to be willing to own our pieces of it, but then see it all the way to the end so that the customer gets the resolution they want. I'm sorry, you could say that again. I've seen her in action with terrible customers. You can leave it too.
We'll leave it.
I hope I didn't laugh for long enough that you can cut it.
All right, well, now you can be the captain of customer conflict. Just thought of that right on the spot.
The CCC.
So be sure to subscribe. And if you want to know more about Michelle, you can find her at speakmichelle.com. I'll put a link down below. Did I tell them to subscribe?
You did. But say it again.
But we should say it many times if you haven't subscribed already. And you know what? Next to the subscribe button, a little bell appears when you subscribe. You can actually click on it and you'll get notified. You'll get alerts.
Awesome.
So every time a new video is uploaded, obviously you want to know about it. So we'll see you tomorrow.